Good morning. Yes, that's better than just some seconds ago. I'm Ilse Carré from University College of Ghent, and we have a lot of experience in digital printing of textiles, and I'm going to give you an overview of what is happening at this moment with digital printing of textiles and what the future trends are. So we will start with some facts. If we look at the worldwide production of printing, we see that a lot of production, analog production using screens, is in Asia, in China, India, and a lot of countries outside Europe. Perhaps some facts. Today we have 40 billion square meters which is printed on. A lot is still analog, a lot is still with using screens, but in the future digital will break through, so there is an opportunity for 40 billion square meters in the future. Today it's only 1 or 2%, but it's growing anyway. 60% of all consumption is in Europe, China, Japan, and USA. 60% of all production is in China, Bangladesh, Pakistan, Vietnam, Thailand, and Indonesia of the conventional production. If we look at traditional printing and the main fibers that are used, we see that a lot of fibers are cotton fibers. This is because also in traditional printing, people are trying to use for the easiest way to print something. And the easiest way to print something is using a pigment and then afterwards just a heat treatment. The other fibers which are less presented, for example, a polyester fiber is printed on with a dispersed dye. This is already a little bit more difficult to print, even conventional. And then we see a lot of fibers that are only have very small parts like silk, wool, nylon. This is because these fibers are very difficult to print. You really need a lot of expertise and a lot of technique, even using conventional printing, to get a high resolution. It's a very extreme procedure. It's a long procedure. You need a lot of water and you also produce a lot of waste. So there is a large opportunity for digital at the moment. So if we make a prognosis for DP, we see that it will grow in the future and that it will double, and perhaps it will completely be replaced. Perhaps it will replace the conventional printing completely in the future. So if we see today that mainly digital printing is done on flags for the graphical sector, and then if we look at everything that is apparel and that is fashion, it's only a very small part that is represented. And there is the challenge to go to more digital production. So today we have 2 to 5%, but in the future this will grow anyway. If we look at the upcoming EU markets for DP printing, we see, for example, Turkey, Spain, Portugal. If we look at soft sign, we see Germany, Scandinavia, Belgium, Holland. If we look at fashion, it's mainly Spain, Italy that really are fashion producers, production of, for example, scarves, silk scarves which are printed digital, etc. And today, starting digital printing is also in UK, etc. So the change is from analog, from screens to digital. Anyway, we see that for example, digital printing, the way to the market is a lot shorter. So if we work by a conventional procedure, we have first a design, we have to make a color separation, we have to make a screen before we can sell something. If we use a digital printing, we can go over these steps quite quickly. So we receive a design, and if we have the right software, if we have the right printer, and if we have the right textiles and inks, we can start printing immediately. So within 10 minutes, as the last speaker said, we can indeed start printing, if everything fits, of course. So there are a lot of benefits in digital printing. For example, a lot less waste. We don't need screens to be stocked somewhere, so there is a lot of have less waste, etc. So reduced stocks, virtual stocks, economical and ecological benefits. We have faster and more frequent design changes, etc. So in fact, digital printing, we can say we don't have a stock, we don't have waste, and we don't have setup costs if we want to make a production. If we look at the markets of digital printing today, then we can in fact divide the markets into some conventional textile markets, such as apparel, fashion, soft sign, and then carpet, tiles, and rugs, which are traditional textile markets. It's there that we want the penetration of the digital to be larger. And then we also have some new textile markets for digital printing, such as technical textiles and home furnishing. So the largest challenge at this moment is to introduce digital printing for fashion. There we really can get large turnovers if we introduce it in the right way. I will show you some application of digital printing today. So we have to think in concepts and not as before. If we look at the basic components, if we look at the basic components of digital printing, there are 4 components which are quite important to get the right result. This is the hardware, meaning the kind of printer that you will use to get the result. Is it a small printer, a small large format printer, or is it really a high production speed printer? Then very important is the type of software that you will use, which kind of rip system will you use to transform the colors in the design to your textiles, so the recalculation of the colors. Here we approach, as textile people, colors in a different way than, for example, people from graphical sector. As a textile people, we want to have some influence on the colors. So the approach is slightly different from, for example, soft signage and conventional graphical sector. And then, of course, we have the choice of the inks themselves, and then, of course, the textiles. So everything should really fit together to get the right quality and the right production in one time. When we focus on the RIP, and we look at the color management, and we look at what is on the market today, there are different RIP software systems. There are systems in which you cannot change yourself anything. So you buy a closed system, you buy a printer, you buy an ink, and you also buy the RIP software. So in fact, you have very little influence of what you will do. What you can print, if your neighbor has the same software and the same printer, he will be able to print on the same substrate, the same design. So there is no advantage in such a software. You really need software in which, so the software transforms, of course, the colors from the design. You really need to select software in which you have the choice yourself of choosing your ink set. For example, I have some examples here. You can choose for high speed and maximum production, then you can use twice a CMYK ink set. Or you can say, I really want to be able to make certain specific colors, and then you will use another setup. Then you will choose a CMYK and you will select own colors which are different from the colors your neighbor will use. And this is the way to create really a large color gamut. So in this way you can create more colors. So this is an example of a conventional CMYK, and then enlarging the CMYK by using 6 colors, so you really enlarge the colors which you can make. For example, if you want to make a very, very bright yellow, and you don't have a bright yellow, you will never be able to print it. But in fashion, everything is about color, about attraction. So you really need very vivid colors. So it's very important to make the right selection before you start printing, to set up the right ink set. and their software has to support it. If software doesn't able you to choose your own colors, then you are quite limited. Then, of course, you have the textile and the textile substrate. Never forget the textile substrate. Where do we start? We start conventionally. What does it mean? We first have to select our fiber type. For example, we choose for a silk or we choose for a cotton fiber, and then we have to pre-treat it traditionally. What does it mean? It has to be very white before we start printing. It has to absorb the dye, otherwise we will not get a good equal quality print. So we really need the conventional pre-treatment before we can start the digital printing. We also, for example, can choose for either a spun or a filament yarn. We can choose a woven, a knitted fabric, or a non-woven. For a knitted fabric, for example, dimensional stability is very important. If we have something that moves during printing, our print will be deformed. It will not be nice. So we really need dimensional stability. So we have the conventional pre-treatment, and then we can start the next step. Within the conventional pre-treatments, we also have, for example, some chemical pre-treatments, desizing of the woven fabric, for example, bleaching, alkaline treatment, for example, of a cotton, so that it can really absorb a lot of dye. So the conventional treatment should be in anyway. And then for the digital printing, one step is added. For every fiber that is printed, we really need a specific treatment. So this is an extra step, and then we have the direct digital printing step. And afterwards, we have to finish it in a conventional way. So we really need this extra step. Why? Because otherwise, the color will not want to stay with the fiber. We have to fix the color to the fiber. This is really important. So if we look, for example, at some water-based inks, we need a pre-treatment. I will show you an overview. This is, for example, a polyester fiber that is not pre-treated, and it starts bleeding very quickly with the direct disperse dye printed. If we pre-treatment, we see two things. First of all, we have a lot less bleeding of the product. We have a lot less bleeding of the ink. And the second thing that we see that is that the color changes. So due to the pre-treatment that we give, we also can enlarge and optimize the colors that we get. So we need the pre-treatment for different things to have the right resolution on certain fibers, for example, polyester fibers, to also fix the dye to the fiber, and then to optimize the color space that we will get with a certain ink set. This is, for example, an overview of a polyamide printed with acid dyes, and due to the pre-treatment we have a larger color buildup with the same ink set. So it's really necessary to pre-treat in the right way. We also have to make a selection of the inks which are adequate for the substrate. If we look at an ink, then there are different components in the ink. One of the first things is the carrier. If we talk about the carrier, it means, is it a solvent ink? Is it an eco-solvent ink, a latex ink, a water-based ink? If we want inks for fashion, we always choose a water-based ink. We cannot use a solvent ink, for example, for fashion, because it's not good for the skin. We have VOCs coming out, so we definitely have to choose for water-based inks. Otherwise, we will get into problems. Then we also have, for example, or a dye or a pigment in the ink. There is quite a difference. If you use a pigment in the ink, this means that you need a binder. So the binder will make the link between the fiber and between the color pigment. If you use a dye, the dye will enter the fiber and you will have to make a fixation of the dye. So it's really a different approach. If you use a pigment, you always have a layer on the fabric. So this also means that the wash and the fast fastness properties are less good than, for example, if you use a real dye. And then there are other things in inks, such as humectants, so that the ink wets the fiber well, etc. So this is just for the behavior of the ink in the inked head. So, but I will not go into detail for this. So if we choose the inked, then I have an overview of some of the inks that are used on textiles. The first 3 inks are mainly used for graphical sector, for sign, not for fashion applications. And then we have the waterborne inks. And within the waterborne inks, we then again have a large variety of possibilities. For example, acid inks, which are used for polyamide, for silk, for wool. We also have, for example, disperse inks, which can be used directly or which can be used by a transfer paper. We have reactive inks. Reactive inks are very good for example, cellulosic fibers, and then also, for example, for a silk or for a polyamide. And then we have the pigments ink. The pigments normally can be used on all fibers. So with the pigment ink, you can easily print on a polyester cotton. Whereas if you have a polyester cotton fiber and you want to use other inks, you have to choose twice an ink, which makes the complete procedure very difficult. So the pigment ink is really very interesting because in theory you can print on all fibers. And then we have latex inks for vinyl, for example. Here I have more or less the same slide with some applications. For example, if we use a polyamide, we can use it in swimsuits. For example, the company Van de Velde will do this, but I will go over it quite quickly. So if we look at some trends, what are the trends? The trends are going to quicker production. What does it mean? If possible, less specific pretreatment for digital printing, and then also less after treatment. Less after treatment means no steaming, no washing, if possible. It's ink dependent, it's not always possible. So if we look today, more and more polyester is combined with, for example, elastan fiber. And an elastan fiber is a nasty fiber. You really have a lot of problems during printing, so it might be that fastness properties are lower. In a lot of cases, it's also combined with microfiber. A microfiber is used, for example, for sportswear because it's very soft. If you look at a microfiber, I think I have here the example, with 1 kilogram we can go round the world, so it's really a very fine fiber. But we really need a lot of dye, a lot of ink to get a certain color depth. So this is a trend that is coming up in the future. Then, so use of more microfibers, and then also use of more polyester. If we look at after treatments, I will quickly go over it, but if you use reactives, acids, disperse, you see there is a lot of time, steaming, rinsing, washing off, so a lot of time, a lot of energy, ecological impact quite high. If you look at the pigments, it's a lot better. It's just a heat fixation and you don't need any after washing. So you have a specific pretreatment, you print with the pigment on all fiber combinations that you want to select, and then you just have heat fixation. UV is also used in certain cases, and it's also very easy because you don't have to after wash it neither. But for the pigments, anyway, you also need the pretreatment to get the right color build-up. No pretreatment means that the colors are more dull, so it's really important to introduce the specific pretreatment. If we go over to printers and hardware, then this is a little bit an overview of all possibilities. If we go into detail and look at what is used for textiles, then it's mainly drop-on-demand techniques, piezo and valve jet techniques. Piezo for everything that is flat, and then valve jet systems for example, polyamide carpets. So in the development of the print head, what is the main development? That we want to bring more ink on the substrate during firing of the nozzles. For example, a wool fiber really needs a lot of ink to get a certain color depth. So this is the challenge to produce print heads that will be able to jet quite larger volumes during the jetting. If we look at the width of the printers, there is also a variety. For example, waterborne printers going from 1.60 m to 3.20 m, which is corresponding with the market. And for example, if you want something for a bedding, you really need something that is already quite wide. If it's for clothing, 1.60 m will be sufficient. Solvent printers can work up to 5 meters. And then we also have some super large printers which can go up to 12 meters. So there is a lot of variety. Also in speed there is a lot of variety. You can either use a large format printer which really prints slow, or you can go for high production. So there are all kinds of possibilities. For example, if we look to 2003, or if we look to a small, large format printer, it will take quite some time to print 30,000 square meters. And if we look today, we can do it within 2 hours. So there is a printer for everybody, for the ones that really want large production, and then also for the ones that just want small, high quality, creative production. Everybody can make his own choice. So I will end by giving some advices. These are: quality must be the first priority. It's very easy to make waste production, really. If you don't have a good pre-treatment, if the after-treatment is not good, the production is not good. Never compromise on quality. Never underestimate your client or customer. They are really getting more demanding concerning fastness properties, concerning durability, concerning ecologically, and also concerning colors. If they have a certain color in mind, you don't have to come up with a color that has a delta E of 2.5. It will be rejected. It's not good anymore. Train your operators. That's a key to success. If they know what will happen with the machine, they will be able to intervene when there is something going wrong. And then try to have a good communication between the designer and the one who should print. So if your designer is someone at home, a customer, explain what he should do to get the right colors so that you can really print what he wants. So we want to print by the ER to the third philosophy, which means efficient, ecological, economical, right, and then right first time, right every time, and right on time. So digital technology really makes it possible to be very creative by your own, to make your own niche market. I'm about at the end of my presentation, and I would like to invite you to the third Digital Congress, which is held in Ghent on the 4th and the 5th of September. We will be there. You will all be able to visit our labs, to see the printers, to ask questions, and we will be glad to demonstrate this for you. Any questions?